Deep beneath the granite peaks of North Korea, a switch was thrown. A nuclear device, barely a kiloton in yield, vaporized rock into plasma. The mountain shuddered, the ground collapsed. To the outside world, it was a political provocation, but geologically, it was a test of endurance. The regime was not satisfied. They returned in 2009, then again and again. Each time the yield increased. Each time the mountain held. By 2017, the violence reached its peak. A charge estimated between 100 and 250 kilotons, dwarfing the bomb dropped on Hiroshima, was detonated inside the same tortured peak. The resulting shockwave registered as a magnitude 6.3 earthquake. It was felt in Japan. Surface displacement was detected nearly 600 meters from the epicenter. North Korean engineers expected the mountain to shatter, literally disintegrating under the nuclear fire. But when the dust settled, the mountain remained. Humanity has spent decades detonating its most apocalyptic weapons inside the planet's crust, beneath its oceans, and along its fault lines. We have thrown fire at the Earth, expecting it to break. But the Earth is resilient in ways we struggle to comprehend. Today, we investigate that resilience. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable planet? And what would happen if we turned that weapon against nature's ultimate pressure valve, a supervolcano? To understand why the mountain survived, we must understand the violence of the event. A nuclear detonation is not an explosion in the conventional sense. It is the momentary creation of conditions found only in stellar cores. In a fraction of a second, solid matter ceases to exist. It transitions instantly into plasma. A shock wave compresses the surrounding rock with force before violently heaving it outward. Above ground, this creates the iconic mushroom cloud. Underground, there is nowhere for the energy to go. Mount Mantap was a geological fortress. Millions of years of tectonic pressure had forged a peak of basalt and granite. This rock is dense. 35 cubic feet of it weighs nearly 3 tons. Now, imagine millions of tons of that rock, resisting displacement. The North Koreans had carved horizontal tunnels, driving thousands of feet into the mountain's heart. They created a natural pressure vessel. When the 2017 bomb detonated, the granite absorbed the momentum, dissipating the thermal pulse through its mass. But resilience has a limit. While the mountain stood, it was internally hemorrhaging. American and Chinese researchers confirmed that the repeated trauma had created a tired mountain syndrome. The rock had fractured, the surface had sagged, and the structural integrity was effectively gone. The cage had held, but it would not survive another blow. This is a lesson the United States learned decades prior. In the high plateaus of Rainier Mesa, Nevada, the U.S. government conducted over 60 underground tests between 1957 and 1992. Here, the science was precise. Tunnels doubled as laboratories, lined with sensors to measure neutron flux and shock propagation. They discovered that while the Earth can contain the fire, it remembers the injury. Zones of loosening formed. Crack networks expanded. The rock grew soft. Yet remarkably, there was never a catastrophic failure. The plateau held. The Earth, it seemed, could take a punch. But rock is solid, stable, predictable. What happens when you detonate a nuclear weapon in a medium that is fluid, crushing, and endless? The Pacific Ocean covers 71% of our planet. It is a world of crushing pressure and absolute darkness. Naturally, we tried to blow it up. The question was simple. Could a submarine survive a nuclear near-miss? The answer was Operation Wigwam. In 1955, the U.S. Navy suspended a 30-kiloton device, a Mark 90 Betty, 2,000 feet beneath the surface. This was a realm where physics behaves differently. When the device detonated, there was no flash, no fireball. Observers on the surface saw only a slight heave, followed by a terrifying expanse of white mist. To the naked eye, the ocean seemed to barely react. But 2,000 feet down, the violence was absolute. The heat created a bubble of steam and gas 360 feet wide. But the ocean fought back. The water pressure crushed the bubble, collapsing it, only for the energy to bounce back,
expanding and collapsing again in a rhythmic, deadly cycle. These pressure pulses acted like a hammer. Target submarines, submerged for the test, were externally intact but internally devastated. Bulkheads shifted, equipment sheared off. The crew would not have survived. Yet the ocean swallowed the radiation. The toxic bubble never breached the surface. The currents diluted the fallout into the abyss. The sea remained indifferent.
But when you bring the fire closer to the surface, the ocean is less forgiving. 1946, Bikini Atoll, Operation Crossroads. The goal was to see what a nuclear weapon would do to a fleet of warships. The bomb, known as Baker, was suspended just 90 feet below the surface of the lagoon. The detonation did not just displace water, it atomized it. A column of steam, sand, and pulverized coral shot into the stratosphere. The battleship USS Arkansas, 27,000 tons of steel, was hurled upward by the shockwave and driven into the lagoon floor within seconds. This time, the radiation did not vanish. It coated the surviving ships in an invisible, lethal grime. It saturated the sand and the soil. For decades, Bikini Atoll was a ghost town, too radioactive for human habitation. 8 years later, the violence escalated. Castle Bravo, a 15-megaton thermonuclear device, was detonated on Bikini's reef. It was the largest American nuclear test ever conducted, and a catastrophic miscalculation. The yield was nearly triple the prediction. Radioactive fallout drifted for hundreds of miles, poisoning Marshall Islanders and irradiating a Japanese fishing vessel, the Lucky Dragon. The world witnessed, for the first time, the true horror of fallout. And yet, nature returned. Today, the radiation in the lagoon has dropped to near background levels. Coral reefs have claimed the sunken warships. Life has adapted, colonized, and thrived in the shadow of our deadliest experiments. We tested the rock, we tested the water. Then, hubris led us to the most dangerous place of all, a tectonic fault line. Amchitka Island, Alaska, a place where the North American and Pacific plates grind against one another. It is a land of earthquakes and volatility. It was here, in 1971, that the United States decided to conduct its largest underground test in history, Cannakin. 5 megatons, 400 times the power of Hiroshima, buried 6,000 feet down. Critics screamed that this was madness. They warned of triggered earthquakes, massive tsunamis, the breaking of the Earth's crust. When the bomb went off, the shock wave registered as a magnitude 7.0 event. The ground lifted 20 feet into the air. Cliffs collapsed. A mile-wide crater formed, which remains today as Cannakin Lake. The biological cost was immediate. The shock wave liquefied the internal organs of thousands of sea otters. It was a localized massacre, but the geological apocalypse? It never came. The fault line absorbed the blow. The tectonic plates did not shatter. The Earth shook, settled, and continued its slow, grinding march, utterly unimpressed by our 5-megaton hammer. The fault held. The plates remained intact. This led some to wonder, if the Earth can absorb our worst, could we harness that force for its benefit? Supervolcanoes like Yellowstone or Tambora hold enough energy to end civilization. Pressure builds over centuries, waiting for a release. This leads to a seductive, dangerous question. Could we nuke a volcano to relieve the pressure? The theory relies on brute force. Drill a shaft, insert a nuclear device, and detonate it near the magma chamber. The hope is that the blast would fracture the rock, creating new vents, allowing the gas and magma to bleed off slowly rather than exploding all at once. It sounds plausible, until you do the math. The Tsar Bomba, the largest weapon ever detonated by man, yielded 50 megatons. The eruption of Krakatoa released an estimated 200 megatons. Tambora, nearly 1,000. And Yellowstone's magma chamber holds energy equivalent to thousands of Tsar Bombas, released over hours, not microseconds. Trying to stop a supervolcano with a nuke is like trying to stop a hurricane with a pistol shot. The energy scales are simply not in the same universe. Furthermore, geology is chaotic. A nuclear blast wouldn't create neat, orderly vents. It would shatter the rock unpredictably. It could block existing escape routes, increasing the pressure. Or worse, the shock wave could destabilize the magma chamber, triggering the very eruption we sought to prevent. Only now, the ash cloud is radioactive. We have tested the limits of our planet. We have burned the rock, boiled the sea, and hammered the fault lines. We have left scars, craters, radiation, and sunken fleets. But in every instance, the result is humbling. The mountain stands, the ocean heals, the fault line holds. We often speak of destroying the planet, but the history of nuclear testing reveals a colder truth. We can damage the surface. We can poison the biosphere. We can render our own world uninhabitable. But the Earth itself? It barely notices we are here. The planet will endure. Whether we will is another question entirely.